Hey everyone, you may have seen recently that we updated the No Code Founders website, and I thought it might be interesting to give you a behind the scenes look at how we actually built it because we vibe coded the site in 3 days, whereas our previous site was built on Bubble and it took us 3 months to build, which at the time was still pretty quick in terms of all the features it had. But this site is a more complex site and it only took us 3 days, including a lot of data migration. So if you aren't familiar with vibe coding tools, this is a nice practical introduction to seeing how they work in a real world setting as well. So this that I'm in at the moment is Macally, which is a vibe coding tool similar to Bolt and Lovable, if you've either came across either of those in the past. The difference with Macally, and the reason I chose it, was because it has server-side rendering, which basically means that the pages created on the site will actually rank in Google, whereas sites built on Bolt and Lovable aren't really great at that yet, and they're more for like building online apps. So that's why I chose Macally, and I just wanted to give you an overview of how it works, and then also some of the key things I did in building the site. So at the left side here, we have a chat interface, which is basically like using ChatGPT or Claude, and this is where you put your prompts and tell Macally exactly what you want built. You can change to specific sections on the page. You can also put files in here and tell it to add it to the database. So for example, I had tools that I wanted to add and I cleaned up that data and then I added it as a CSV and it added them all in one go. I can also go in here and make visual edits. So it has this visual edits option. So I can click on specific sections and change elements or delete them or anything that I want to do. But most of the edits are going to happen in the actual chat. So what I did to get started was I created a project in Claude where I put in all the information about the site and everything that I needed for the new build and asked it to create a prompt. So it outlined everything that was needed, including things like payments, member login, database, steal redemption codes, all of these sort of things. So it was quite a long prompt, and it's actually more effective to do a really big prompt at the beginning. And this prompt took around 10 to 15 minutes to build, and it was probably about 90% of the way there in terms of what it actually produced. I spent the next couple of days refining it and getting all the different aspects of the site exactly the way I wanted it to be and the way that lined up with what we already had. I think if you're building for the first time, then you'll get pretty much a good to go site from the first build. So you'll be able to build in a couple of hours to something that's ready for market. What I then did was I asked it to add 3 examples to the database of tools so that I could see what it was going to look like. I said Lovable, Bolt, and Anytime. It went and researched them, found information, found logos, and added them. And then I asked it to add another 21. It found more that were similar and added those. So Macally also has scraping built in, so it's able to fetch information from other sites. I used this just as demo data and deleted it later, but this allowed me to see what the site would look like once I added a lot of data in. But some of the things which really blew me away, because this was the first time I'd actually vibe coded something from scratch. And I should clarify that when I say vibe coded, I didn't actually touch any code at all. It's not like using Cursor or some of these other tools. You can go into code, and as we can see up here, and edit, but I was just doing everything through the chat. But I did a couple of things where, so one thing was I uploaded these press logos. And I said add an as featured in section, and it came, here we go, it came up with this styling itself of like making the small caps, centralizing, grayscaling the logos so that it didn't distract from the main call to action section, which I just thought was really cool because I didn't prompt it to do this, it just came up with this itself. And the same with this illustration, this isn't something I've created, it created it itself. Another thing I did was I was building this guides section, which is effectively a blog, and I had guides spread across multiple places. One was our newsletter, which is on Beehive, and another was on the old site. The old site ones I could just import as a CSV, but the ones on Beehive, the guides were in amongst other content in newsletters. So I just tried putting in the Beehive website URL and I said, search through all the posts, find any content that looks like guide content and add it to the guides database. And it did it. So it pulled just the guides out of each newsletter, and it also created these images in a consistent style. And then it even added inline images to the guides themselves to illustrate each part, which was just insane to me because it would have taken hours of really boring work, but it did it in like 5 minutes. And it also connected it up to the tools in the database, so those were interlinked. So those were just two features that were sort of unlocks for me to how powerful this could be. The other thing I added was a list your tool page where companies can go and add their tool listing. And then I also added an admin dashboard where I can then moderate all the content that's being added to the site. So this took 3 days in total to build, and it was a much cleaner version than what we already had. In terms of connecting up Stripe and Beehive, I just had to, it prompted me to add in the API key for Beehive, and that was it. So I added that directly into the chat. And then the same with Stripe. It told me exactly what I needed to do. So this is an entirely new way of building. I'm going to be creating a course on using Macally soon. So if you're interested in that, check that out. And in this week's newsletter, I'm including a prompt, which you can use as a prompt for any vibe coding site that you want to build, which will give you some good frameworks on how to have a prompt that's going to get you 80% of the way there. So I hope that's helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.